Want to listen to this Ivory Tower Boiler Room episode and all of our Ivory Tower Boiler Room episodes ad free? Head to our Patreon, patreon.com. That's patreon.com/ Ivory Tower Boiler Room for $5 a month. You get all of our ad free episodes, our video interviews, and our bonus episodes. See you there.
Was talking to a friend of mine who she's a filmmaker and a producer, and she had just finished a project that involved the Lauder family. And she said, why don't you take a look at Estée? And it was literally one quick Google search. And I was like, oh my God, how can it be that nobody's written a novel about this woman? She's fascinating. And you know, there's so much more to Estée than meets the eye.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Ivory Tower Boiler Room. I'm really excited to be joined with best-selling author Renée Rosen. I just want to give you all a little background. So try to imagine you are in Manhattan. You are on Park Avenue, Fifth Avenue. Get in your Upper East Side um, bubble of an imagination right now. But Renée is the USA Today best-selling author of The Social Graces, Park Avenue Summer, Windy City Blues. Okay, we're moving away from Manhattan there. White Collar Girl, What the Lady Wants, and Dollface. She is also the author of Every Crooked Pot, a young adult novel. She lives in Chicago, and right now she's actually working on a historical novel about Ruth Handler, the woman who invented the Barbie doll, which couldn't have come at a better time. I mean, Renée.
Oh, I
Well, first,
know.
hi, Renée.
Hi, how are you?
Good. Well, first, did you know that they were filming this
You
movie?
know, it's funny because I have wanted to tell the Ruth Handler story for years before there was any talk about a Barbie movie. And it just the time wasn't right for me to go to that book. And so after I finished Estee, I was like, okay, I got to do the Ruth Handler story. Got to do it.
Yeah,
And it's
and Ruth
fascinating
Handler,
stuff.
when is she really creating? I know we're going to talk about Estée Lauder, don't worry, but
Yeah.
when is Ruth Handler creating the Barbie doll?
So it was in 1959, and people, I was just fascinated to find that Barbie was inspired by a novelty gag doll uh, uh, based on a prostitute or a gold digger in Germany
Oh,
called
wow.
Build Lily. And if you saw the Build Lily doll next to the original Barbie doll with the ponytail and all, you'd be like, what's the difference? So it's really interesting. But I'll tell you this much. This is my promise to readers. Like, whether you loved Barbie and played with her or you shaved off all of her hair in a fit of protest, this book will speak to the feminists out there. There's a reason Barbie's waist is so thin, tiny, and it has nothing to do with that body image. It's a very practical reason. It's the same reason why she has a size 3 foot and not a
Oh,
size 7 foot. There's a lot of optical illusion going on there.
oh, I'm excited. So when is your novel about Ruth Handler
Yeah.
coming out?
I'm working on it now. It's slated for spring of 2025.
Ooh, okay. Well, you're coming back here to talk about that. Okay.
Okay.
Because
I would
I
love that.
had an obsession with Barbie dolls and I loved um creating imaginative scenarios, especially play acting with them because I have a background in theater. So
Mhm.
that was like my direction with it. And I'm also curious, this film is going to be so satirical and
Oh, yeah.
it's a pun in itself, right?
Oh,
It's just
yeah.
mocking the genre of Barbie.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens with that. But Renee had asked me what had gotten me into Estee Lauder. And if you don't know, Fifth Avenue Glamour Girl is a historical fictional retelling of Estee Lauder. Um, but it really is so fascinating to me, Renee, because first I had really learned a lot about Elizabeth Arden and Helena Rubinstein's feud. I mean,
Yeah.
they weren't really feuding, but these two beauty magnet women, it sparked a lot of material with the War Paint musical. So I
Yeah.
saw that musical, um, and really was fascinated with what's behind these self-made women, but these beauty magnets, and how they really use the industry to their advantage, right? Like, because it is such a feminine, quote unquote, industry, especially in that early 20th century, how do they make a mark as an entrepreneur? And like, I'm always fascinated with entrepreneurial narratives, but especially what women did in terms of almost subverting the beauty industry.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that's how Estee Lauder, I mean, isn't there that quote, is it Estee Lauder a family company?
Yeah, very much
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, that's like the um business motto. But what drew you to Estee Lauder?
Well, I had just finished working on the social graces. And, the next thing is always, what are you going to write next as soon as you finish? And I really didn't have any ideas. And I was talking to a friend of mine who she's a filmmaker and a producer, and she had just finished a project that involved the Lauder family. And she said, why don't you take a look at Estee? And it was literally one quick Google search. And I was like, oh my God, how can it be that nobody's written a novel about this woman? She's fascinating. And you know, I there's so much more to Estee than meets the eye.
Hi, this is Andrew, and I'm interrupting what I know is an enthralling interview because I want you all to know that we are sponsored by Broadview Press. And if you don't know, Broadview Press is an independent academic publisher who publishes books covering topics like English studies, writing, philosophy, history, gender studies. And every season on the podcast, I interview one of the Broadview Press authors. So for the fall, we had Anne Stevens on to talk about literary theory and criticism. She played a Wizard of Oz literary game with us. She talked about why Bridgerton actually involves literary theory. So does 50 Shades of Grey. Who knew? Um, and also, we just had on Jeffrey Weinstock, who wrote the first ever pop culture analysis book. So, I am all things a lover of pop culture, especially my Hollywood topics, Real Housewives, the list goes on and on. And he also wrote the book called The Mad Scientist's Guide to Composition, where he's writing a book teaching students about how to write rhetorical strategies, but it's all around this metaphor of being in the mad scientist laboratory. Because as you'll learn when you hear our episode with Jeffrey, he is a gothic and horror fanatic. And I mean that in all the best ways possible. So you don't want to miss Broadview Press's exclusive discount because you're listening to the podcast. All of you get an automatic 20% off. Use the code Ivory Tower for 20% off site wide on all of their books. So in our show notes, we have a link to Broadview Press. Make sure you click the link, put in Ivory Tower, and you're going to get 20% off your order. So enjoy your reading, everyone.
And as I'm starting to, the book is out next Tuesday. And as I'm starting to, prepare and everything, I realize how difficult a book this is to talk about without giving away spoilers. So it's kind of, it's a little bit like Fight Club. If you know Estee's story, the first rule is we don't talk about Estee's story, So I find myself sort of tiptoeing around things that,
Well, what's exciting is as this comes out, your book is out in paperback. It is out in paperback, right? Or just hardcover?
no, paperback, straight
Paperback.
paperback.
Okay. So
Yeah.
it's a beautiful cover with
Yeah.
a glamour model in a way. One of those, is this a department store model or one who would be at a makeup counter?
I don't know where they found that image, but we struggled with the cover for a while. And when they came up with this, I was like, oh my God, I love it. And she could be the narrator. She could be, any woman. Um, but it was important to me that they incorporated Estee blue, that, beautiful blue color. And I thought they
Yeah.
just treated it so well.
They did a wonderful job. And
Yeah.
also, do you know who's narrating the audiobook version?
Yeah, oh, it's Hillary. I'd have to look it up. But we picked her from a group of auditions.
Oh,
And I've
wonderful.
heard a snippet of it and it's really good.
Yeah,
And
well,
the narrator makes or breaks those books.
of course. And I think for everyone out there, because this is a historical retelling, it's important for everyone to realize what's fascinating is you hook us right away with your prologue. And it's almost this frame narrative of what I love, like the Canterbury Tales or Scarlet Letter. Like there's this story within the story, but you as the writer, Renee, there's also a biographer who's writing an Estee Lauder biography. And then that's how Gloria, our fictional character, comes to find out that this biography is happening. Estee does not approve of the biography, but the biographer doesn't care and is going to go ahead on the unauthorized version, which happens all the time. Um, and like, how did that all start in your mind, Renee? Like, oh, I have to really jump ahead before I actually begin with Estee Lauder's rise to
Yeah.
fame.
Well, for me, the writing process is very curious land. I don't outline. I don't know how dots are going to connect. I, you know, I knew that I wanted that book to be my jumping off point only when my narrator came on the page and started talking to me.
Mm.
I didn't have a clue that I was going to do that until the first words. I do my research. I feel like I have enough of a foundation to sit down and write. And I started writing. And the first thing Gloria said to me was, I cannot tell a lie, although that's not entirely true. I thought, oh, I want to follow. Where is this going to go to? And then, it turns out, and, we should probably talk a little bit about Lee Israel, who was the real life biographer. And I don't know if you want me to give a little background on that.
Yeah, please do.
Okay, so Lee Israel in 1984, she was a very successful, accomplished biographer. And she had a New York Times bestseller, and her publisher, Macmillan, threw a lot of money at her to write the unauthorized biography of Estee Lauder. And when Lee Israel starts doing her sort of deep dive into all things Estee, she finds that some things are not washing. And when Estee catches wind of the fact that Lee Israel is doing a biography on her, Estee moves right into damage control and starts writing her own book because she has to control the narrative. She's going to have to explain some things that Lee Israel may raise. And so it's literally these two women racing towards publication. And, Estee wins that race by about 3 weeks. Random House puts out her book before Macmillan can get the Lee Israel book out.
Yeah.
And that it just seemed like that could be a device for the jumping off point for Gloria to, when Lee Israel knocks on Gloria's door and says, tell me about your friend Estee, that's sort of the point where Gloria can go back and start recounting their story, because you can't tell Estee's story without throwing herself under the bus too.
Well, and that's what I love about the way research is done, but especially with such high profile people. Like I'm even thinking there was that unauthorized biography of Anna Wintour that just came out like a year ago. And like that was in my mind when I was reading your historical retelling.
Mhm.
And um I'm always attracted to how a biographer has to piece together a narrative through interviews, through the acquaintances, but like you really want to get to that person. Like if you could get that sit down with Estee Lauder, I mean, what would that have been like, Renee, if you actually were able to talk with Estee Lauder?
If I was able
Hmm.
to, I think I would get the book that she wrote. You know, Estee, and it's interesting because makeup, I think that Estee and Helena Rubinstein and Elizabeth Arden are all sort of metaphors for the industry that they shaped. You know, makeup in and of itself is used to contour, it's used to camouflage, it's used to embellish, to enhance. And here were three women who were just that embellishing and enhancing of their own persona was very natural for them. So I think had I sat down with Estee, I would have gotten the exact same story that she has had very carefully crafted for herself. You know, and I went through and I read Lee Israel's book and Estee's book, A Success Story. You could kind of see the dance between the two of them.
Yeah, well, and I think what's so fascinating is even Estee is a character. I mean, her real name was Josephine Esther Menser, and she comes from a Hungarian and Czechoslovak. Oh, we're not allowed to talk about that.
It's Fight Club, Fight Club. We can't give any spoilers away. See, it's really tricky.
I know. Well, I mean, in her biography, you find out that
Right.
she's from a
But that's,
Jewish background.
yeah, yeah. So it's like, if you know Estee's background, great. Just, we don't talk about it.
But I think it does remind me of Joan Rivers, and like even Joan Rivers creates a persona with her name.
Yeah,
And Estee is very different than, I mean, Elizabeth Arden did come from, I think, a farming family from
right,
Canada.
right,
Um, so she was not from a legacy family. She
right,
wasn't Paris Hilton, who was an like a
right,
socialite.
right.
Um, but how was it to try to think of Estee Lauder and retelling her story with her immigrant background? Because it is a very different narrative than if
Yeah,
you wrote about Elizabeth Arden, for example.
yeah. Well, you know, it's interesting because when I write, I get enough of a foundation of who my characters are, and then I literally take my hands off the steering wheel and I let them tell me their stories.
Mm.
So, you know, Estee and Gloria really were on this journey and I was just eavesdropping. Um, you know, their conversations, their friendship, which is you know, I wouldn't say there were frenemies, but there was competition. There was love between them, but there was still some competition there. So you know, I learned that the less I can impose my will upon characters, whether real or fictional, the better off I am.
Yeah, and I'm just curious, are you a fan of The Devil Wears Prada?
You know what? I never read the book. I saw the I loved the movie.
Mhm.
And you know, in fact, when I wrote uh, Park Avenue Summer, which was about Helen Gurley Brown when she first took over Cosmopolitan magazine, as told from the point of view of her secretary. Early reads or anything, people were like, "This is like Mad Men meets The Devil Wears Prada. This is The Devil Wears Prada meets Mad." So after we heard it like 3 or 4 times, we're like, "Okay, that's just how we're going to package this." So
Yeah, you
I
listen to
never
the
read the
people.
book.
Yeah, I did read the book. I enjoyed the nuances of the book, but I think what's sparking my imagination with your work, Renee, is like to me, you are the modern Edith Wharton. Like I
Oh my
I'm
goodness!
a I'm a literary scholar and I love teaching the House of Mirth. And I went to the Mount in Lenox, and I feel like Edith Wharton, though, she's on the inside and kind of became a taboo writer because that's not what delicate, polite women were supposed to do, right? She's not
Right,
supposed to be a published writer. Like,
right. She
so she's just,
exposed. She
yeah,
exposed her own. Right.
yeah, she gossiped on her own people.
Yeah.
Um, but like what I love is, what even just draws you to these Manhattan scenes, to what we always think of as the glossy Saks Fifth Avenue, the lifestyle, the brand that Estee Lauder's embracing, like what she's creating.
Well, so there's a couple things there. I love an underdog. I love someone who's got the odds stacked so against them. And, you know, because I'm always rooting for those people. They have a vision, and everybody's telling them, no, it can't be done. And they find a way anyhow. So there's part of it's that. Part of it, and this is not to be self-deprecating or anything like that, but nobody is out there waiting for the next Renée Rosen book. If somebody asked me, what's your next book about? It's so much easier to say Estée Lauder, the Barbie creators, than it's a woman who goes to Manhattan, and you know what I mean? So I kind of have always relied on sort of a brand name to write about, so that I could literally tell you what my book's about in one, just one quick sentence.
LGBT stories are universal, but each one speaks to the individual heart and soul of the writer telling it. Do you have a story to tell? If so, the Gay and Lesbian Review wants to hear from you. Have you been moved by an LGBT book, film, painting, television show, or other form of media? The GNLR believes in bringing awareness to queer art and artists through reviews, commentary, and thought pieces in which the author relates their personal lives to a particular piece of art, a novel, a movie, or what have you. In addition to the articles published in the print magazine, the GNLR also publishes articles on its blog as well as personal essays on its popular Here's My Story section. This allows people like you to share their own experiences with our readers. To learn more about submitting either to the print or the online edition of the GNLR, visit glreview.org. That's glreview.org, and scroll down to the bottom of the page to find a link to their writer's guidelines. If you have any questions, email stephen.hemrick@glreview.org. The GNLR can't wait to see what you have to say. And remember that they're offering an exclusive code with the Ivory Tower Boiler Room. So when you subscribe to the magazine, you'll receive a free copy with any print or digital subscription. So that's 7 issues instead of 6. Again, just visit theglreview.org and click subscribe and enter the promo code ITBR for your free issue.
So I'm always attracted to that sort of larger than life character, but somebody who has had a really an interesting path to becoming the person that we associate them with.
Mm. Well, is that why historical fiction, it just draws you in, Renée? Because it is all about the real meets the imaginary. Like you do need that research process. You actually have to dig deep into the archive. Like you're not just, I mean, building an imaginary world. I've interviewed Gregory Maguire. Like Wicked is its own, involves a lot of steps, but historical fiction, it makes sense. You're talking about how the brand attracts you as a linchpin in a way.
Yeah. I'm just fascinated by history. I think there's so much that we can learn and apply it to where we're at today. So it's amazing how much things change and don't change. So I've always been attracted to that. I don't think I set out to necessarily write historical fiction. It just seems to be what I'm continuously drawn to. And I love
And
taking a
yeah.
subject that I know very little about and then just getting lost in it.
Well, I was going to say, I know that you live in Chicago, but it does seem like New York City, for some reason, is a mystery or an enigma, especially these upper echelon society women. Like it's sparking a imaginative process for you. What is it about this Upper East Side lifestyle that attracts you?
Well, I've always had a love affair with New York, and maybe it's because I grew up in Akron, Ohio. I don't know, but I did live in New York for a short period of time. And things that can only happen to you in New York will happen to you in New York. The people you meet, there's just opportunities there. And there's just something about I you know, London's great, and but there's something about Manhattan that is just so rich with stories. And nobody moves to New York because they want an easy lifestyle. You just don't. You go to New York because you got a dream, a burning dream, and those who make it, I'm just fascinated by their stories. And people, I think people still associate with, New York is sort of the best of the best in terms of, when it comes to certain fields, that you
Mhm.
had to be in New York, with the internet machine and all that, there's people working remotely now, but there's still that cachet about New York.
Well, and isn't it so fascinating that all these female beauty magnets, you don't think of Los Angeles. Like, right, that's Hollywood. That's
Yeah.
TV and film. Like,
Yeah.
why is that I grew up in South Jersey and right by Philly. So like I remember my nana talking about gimbals and like that department store aesthetic. And I've always loved the um perfume cologne section, like just the aesthetic of a department store. Like there's nothing, I mean, sadly now it's changed shape, but there was nothing like just going from designer to designer and say a Saks Fifth Avenue and just imagining. Like it's always you putting yourself in a new persona. Like, oh, maybe I could be that Ralph Lauren model. Maybe I could fit this lifestyle. And it's full of dreams in a way. Like fashion is a dreaming industry. And it seems like so is beauty. Like you're saying, they're masking usually their real identity.
It's transformation. You put on a particular outfit and you instantly feel better. Woman puts on her lipstick and she's like, okay, I can go face the world now. Like during World War II, that was like a sign. Your red victory red lipstick, that was a sign of patriotism. And you know we are sort of walking billboards for ourselves. And how you present yourself is sort of reflective of how you feel about yourself. And so why it was focused in New York, why were so many things focused in New York? In the United States, that was certainly like the fashion capital, and so it makes sense. I don't know why it was centered there. I really don't.
Maybe like the density of the people, because you're on display a lot,
And
right? Like you're going to encounter more people in your day-to-day life.
could be, and just there are more opportunities for
Hmm.
socializing, for going to restaurant, all of that. And women had their a little bit of disposable income that, even in the worst of times, a woman would always, $2 for a lipstick. Yeah, I can afford that. During the Depression, it was, and they've shown that in times of, financial hardship, the sale of lipstick goes up because it's something that gives somebody a lift. Um,
Mm. And you
so,
have, oh, so, and I was going to say,
well,
in the theater industry of New York City, there's such a, the theatricality. Like I feel that Broadway just electrifies Manhattan. Like you don't have to be in Times Square to feel the energy in every neighborhood of
yeah.
it's like the streets become a stage. I mean, that's why I love New York
Well,
City.
and each neighborhood is so very different.
Hmm.
And when I lived there, I wanted to conquer all of New York. I wanted to know each pocket of New York. And it's so funny because when I go back there now, I'll call a friend who maybe lives in Chelsea and say, hey, we're going to meet on the Upper East Side. And they're like, I don't really know that area. I only know my area. Um, so but I do think it's a fascinating city. It's got a great energy. It's tough though. There were days I would have like emotional lack of equilibrium. Some days were great, some days were whoop. So, but
Yeah.
I never
Yeah.
knew what the day was going to hold.
It's true. It's such a surprise of what's going to happen when you
Yeah.
walk out that door
Yeah.
in the
And I
city.
also love in New York, it's very hard to call attention to yourself in New York. You know what I mean? It's like you could wear just about anything and that's fine. I remember I had this hat, this very big hat, almost like the hat on the that the girl is wearing on the cover of the book. You know, with
Yeah.
a big rim, and I bought it in New York and I wore it all the time. I came back to Chicago, I wear it, and people are like, "What are you doing with it? You got like an LP on your head." Like everybody was so put off that I would wear this hat. So the hat's in my closet now.
Oh, well, it's even like when I take the train back to Long Island or even go to Jersey, but you were just in Manhattan, that suburban energy you feel too. It's um like you're saying, Renee, there's so much experimentation in Manhattan or in Brooklyn or in Queens that, especially I would say now, like Brooklyn and Manhattan, a lot of experimenting going on with fashion and creativity. You could be 30 minutes outside the city and you draw attention to yourself. It's yeah, it's fascinating how that happens. But um I was just in Soho, which is one of my favorite. Like if
Mm.
I always say if anyone just wants to see the new designs, it doesn't involve any money. Like just go into every boutique and explore the new collection. Like there's nothing like seeing what's the newest trends.
Yeah.
And anything goes, like you said. The fashions are all over the place.
Yeah.
Um, but back to you having to balance, I feel, the 1980s and then the 1930s into the 40s, like that into the World War II era is difficult. Like, how was that trying to even think about Esta's story and moving back and forth of how she would be feeling?
Again, it's one of those things where, you know, because I don't outline, I just have to kind of follow my gut. And there were just sort of natural times when I'm like, okay, because the bulk of the book takes place in during the Depression going into the 40s. And we touch upon World War II, although it's not a World War II story, but we were definitely impacted back in the States. But there were just certain points where it was like, okay, now we need to go back into 1984 and see where we're at. So it was sort of this, kind of ebb and flow, and it wasn't really thought out in terms of every few chapters I'm gonna, go back into I'm gonna, fast forward into 1984 and then go backwards.
Yeah. How did you find actually figuring out who Estee Lauder? I mean, Gloria is our fictitious character, almost like a House of Mirth, Lily Barr, even though it's not that same trajectory, thank goodness. No spoilers, but it's not that tragic at the end. Do you find though it was difficult to figure out, oh, Esta would have known um or been in touch with this department store, or her products would have been located here. She would have known these beauty people. Like these were her connections and networks.
Um, Estee was so driven. She was selling 24/7. And I think that she just went where she did go where the money was. She was always courting these wealthy women. Those were the clientele that, she wanted. And, in the wintertime, they all went down to Florida. So Estee packed up her son and went down to Palm Beach and Miami Beach and started working the beauty salons there and working the hotels there. So I think she just had sort of a nose for where the sales were going to be. And that, and getting into Estee's mindset, if she was so driven to succeed and she was so tenacious, she wasn't going to waste her time anywhere that was not going to lead to either a sale or a door opening for her. So So I think it was just her drive that sort of acted as a guide for where she
Yeah.
would go, what she would do, how what her motivation was.
Yeah. Did you have literally her voice in your ear? Like, did you listen a lot to her dialect or how she would deliver messages?
Hey, Ivory Tower Boiler Room listeners and true crime friends. You've heard me gush over this incredible woman and her beautiful products. I'm talking about Mandy Made It. Mandy makes customized and original crochet and pre-cut goods. They are the perfect, unique, one-of-a-kind gift for literally anyone in your life. And she makes incredible home decor. I still have my pumpkins that I put out every fall. I just love them. Check her out on Instagram at MANDEE Made It or search Mandy Made It on Facebook. To order, just slide into her DMs, and if you mention the Ivory Tower Boiler Room, you will receive a free personalized gift with your first order. So, go on Instagram and look up at Mandy Made It, and Mandy is spelled MANDEE. Again, her handle is at Mandy Made It, Mandy spelled MANDEE, and order today.
Hi, this is Andrew. When I'm not here in the Ivory Tower Boiler Room, sometimes I'm actually invited to be on other podcasts as a guest. Well, there is one podcast run by Christian Garcia and his co-host Nate that I absolutely love. It is called That Old Gay Classic Cinema. So calling all you classic cinema fans out there and those who love queer theme cinema, which I think there's a lot of you who are listening right now where you've perked up. So follow them on Instagram at that OL Gay Classic Cinema. The first ever episode I was featured as a guest. It's The Sound of Music. I got to talk about being Captain Von Trapp in high school, and it's just such an exciting conversation. They've also featured discussions about Gone with the Wind, The Wizard of Oz, which features guests from the podcast The Garland Gab and Down the Yellow Brick Pod. There's a deep dive of Cinderella, and recently they had an episode on the film Giants starring Elizabeth Taylor, Rock Hudson, and James Dean. And actually, one of the guests, Lauren Randall, I know from Stony Brook University's PhD English department. So shout out, Lauren. You can listen to That Old Gay Classic Cinema on Apple, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts. It's definitely such a great listen. So why not listen to it after you listen to this current episode on the Ivory Tower Boiler Room?
I got a feel for her mostly from her own book and from her son's memoir. I'm looking at my bookshelf right now on The Company We Keep. That really gave me a feel for who she was, both as a mother and as how she wanted to perceive, or she wanted to be perceived.
Mm.
So I was able to sort of piece it together that way. There's not a lot of uh videoed interviews with Estée. There's a lot of written interviews, and I would read those. But again, she kind of had her story down, and certain details shifted here and there, but she basically had her narrative down. And she was very guarded. Nobody knew when her birthday was. So one of her friends said, "I don't even think the FBI knows how old Estée Lauder is." So I think they finally said it was 1908, but sometimes it was 1909, maybe it was 1910. So she always sort of wanted to be perceived as younger than she was, which is, so many women do that. No big deal there. But she did not give a lot of like on camera type interviews.
Mm. Yeah, which I think says a lot about her protecting her
Yeah,
boundaries and her
yeah, she
image.
definitely
That's
had her
fascinating.
boundaries. She had it
Yeah.
with everything, though. She also had it with her products. They were all of them were very secretive about their ingredients. And I don't think anyone other than Joe and then later Leonard knew, what actually went into her face creams and lotions and other things. But I will tell you this: this was a funny little fact that came out of the research. She had a client that was down in, I think it was Palm Beach, and she wanted a bunch of Estee's face creams. And so Estee told her, it's very humid down there. You need to store it in your refrigerator. So the woman was having a luncheon the next day, and the cook mistook the face cream for salad dressing and put it on the salads, and they all ate it. Nobody got sick, which Estee said, see, my stuff's so pure you could eat it with a spoon. And I guess it didn't taste half bad.
Yeah,
So
that's great brand. That's a good publicity stunt
yeah,
too.
yeah.
Well, and have you heard from the Estee Lauder um family, from anyone tied to Estee Lauder about your book? Like, have they reached out to you about?
They have not reached out. I'm pretty sure they're aware of the book. But I have not heard from anybody directly. I've talked to people that worked for Estee Lauder, but nobody that's directly involved with the family.
Yeah, well, I was surprised that it's been about 20 years since she passed away, right?
Yeah.
Around, she almost lived to 100,
So
which,
we're coming up on the anniversary of her death. It was April 24th.
well, and your book is coming out. Okay. Things are connected. Well, what is something, if Estee Lauder was face to face with you, that you would have loved to say to her after finishing your novel?
Um, what I would like to say to her is that, despite how she may have gotten there, there's no denying what she accomplished. I
Hmm.
mean, she was a trailblazer, and I loved her moxie and just her sheer chutzpah and how she just broke down every obstacle. And my goodness, she is now the second largest cosmetic brand company in the world.
Wow.
And, everything from Clinique, Aveda, Bobby Brown, Joe Malone. I mean, there are dozens of brands that fall under the Estee Lauder umbrella. And she always wanted to be a household name. And it's like, I think that she would just be delighted to see where she took this dream of hers, how far it's gone. I mean, this is a woman who literally started making face creams out of her Upper West Side apartment and then hawking her wares in beauty shops. And look at what she's done.
Yeah, that's a legacy. But
Yes.
like you said, it's not your novel, it's historical fiction, but it details, in order to create a brand like that, there's going to be a ton of obstacles, and also you get messy at
Yeah.
points. There's
Yeah.
no easy trajectory to
And the fact of the matter is, the beauty industry, there's a lot of ugliness under the surface of the beauty industry.
yeah,
It was
you're
very
literally covering
competitive.
up blemishes.
Yeah. I mean, it was
Many,
very competitive, just to get a little bit of counter space in a store like Saks Fifth Avenue. That was really tough. You had to really prove that you deserved that counter space. So they were it was very cutthroat.
yeah. Well, and my last question, before I urge everyone to get their hands on Fifth Avenue Glamour Girl, is did you test out different products for inspiration as you were writing your novel?
Oh, I've always used Estee products. So, others too, but I've always loved some of her fragrances. I used to wear white linen all the time. Um, so yeah, and I have my little gift with purchase, which was an Estee innovation. She really created that. But Yeah, I think she's got great skincare products. Those are probably my favorite of hers, are the skincare products.
Yeah, well, I'm urging everyone out there. I feel that your novel would be wonderful for those who teach Edith Wharton, that this would be a great, like, taking this into the 20th century, or even with The Great Gatsby. I mean, talk about someone who tries to become a self-made man with he has all his lies. But, I think to have the male and the female perspective, a figure like Estee Lauder, we need more novels like yours, Renee, because there aren't as many to point to of a historical retelling of a woman who really creates her vision and is not going to let anything stop them. But especially with her background, that is all revealed. It's
All will be revealed.
all the interstitial aspects are revealed. Well, this has been wonderful. I definitely think this is the spring and summer book we've all been waiting for. So thank you,
From
Renee.
your mouth to readers' ears.
Yes, yes. Well, and where can everyone follow you on social media, Renee?
So I'm on Facebook, Renée Rosen author. I'm on Instagram. Uh, and you can always go to my website, reneerosen.com. I'm doing a lot of virtual events. In fact, I'm doing a virtual event with the Makeup Museum. There's a makeup museum in New York, and we're doing a virtual event on Tuesday at noon. So you can find the link and all that on my website.
Oh, great. Well, thank you so much. It was wonderful meeting you, having this chance to, explore a little Estee Lauder and journey back into our imagination. So I'm excited for everyone out there to reach out to me and to you, especially Renee, about how how your book sits with them and just this fictional realm that they get to occupy. It's a delight to read your novels. So thank you
Um,
so much.
Thank you, Andrew. I appreciate it. It's been fun talking with you.
Thank you. Have a great day. Okay.
You
Bye,
too.
Renee.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to the Ivory Tower Boiler Room. This is Andrew Rimby, the executive director. I want you all to follow us on social media because there's so many video clips that we share and so many photos about these episodes. Follow us on TikTok and Instagram at Ivory Tower Boiler Room. Follow us on Twitter at Ivory Boiler Room. Follow our Facebook page, The Ivory Tower Boiler Room. Join our Patreon, patreon.com/Ivory Tower Boiler Room. For $5 a month, you get ad-free episodes, our video interviews, the True Crime and Academia bonus episodes, and all Ivory Tower Boiler Room bonus episodes. Thanks for buying a coffee for me. And thanks to an amazing team. Thanks, Mary. She's our chief contributor. And thanks to the Ivory Tower Boiler Room spring interns, Andrea, Caitlin, Sarah, Sheila, and Rosie. See you all again in the Ivory Tower Boiler Room.